Hello everyone. So, as Florence says, with the help of several colleagues from the GenderNet Plus project, I will now highlight the main achievements of the project and the next steps for this wonderful community of scientists. So we'll really focus here on the 13 research projects that were co-founded in the frame of GenderNet Plus. So GenderNet Plus has supported a vast and rich community of scientists. There are, as Elizabeth and several others said, 13 transnational research projects, and each project has is made up of a minimum of 3 countries, and there are 15 countries in total represented, so 12 countries being the members of the consortium, so they funded the project, and 3 others that did not participate to the call, that did not fund the project, but are represented among the scientific community. GenderNet Plus, it's 56 research performing organizations involved and more than 382 researchers participating in the project. And of course, in addition, there are also several project partners outside the research and innovation sector, such as NGOs, policymakers that are working closely with researchers on the research program. There's a wide range of disciplines in GenderNet Plus, social sciences, humanities, and health and medicine. All 13 research projects have in common to integrate a sex, gender, or intersectional dimension addressing societal challenges linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Was presented earlier, so topics being sex, gender, and health, gender-based violence, sex, gender, and aging, climate action, and gender in entrepreneurship. One of the main achievements of the scientific community has been the development of new methods and perspective to advance gender-aware science. And 40 GenderNet Plus researchers, as well as several invited experts, had the opportunity to exchange, discuss theoretical, methodological, as well as ethical challenges related to the integration of gender in dimension in research during a workshop that happened last November in Paris. And the outcome of this meeting was the production of guidelines to help the broader scientific community to integrate this gender dimension in their own research work, and as well as joint publication with concrete recommendation, and all of that will be soon made available. We are working on it at the moment. Everyone's involved, and so it will be uploaded on GenderNet Plus website and other platforms as well. And now I will leave the floor to the researchers themselves, to 3 colleagues that will speak about the benefits of the project. And Marja, please, if you want to start first.
Yes, thank you. When I was asked to say something about my experience of the GenderNet Plus, I thought, me? Why me? But I'm happy to share my experience at least. Maybe starting with a disclaimer, I started with this project not as a gender researcher. Actually, I did things with gender, so I controlled for gender, and in the best case, I compared men and women. But that was actually basically what I did, and this is also what we happily did in our research project. So we started, like all of the other groups, 3 years ago. We started with thinking about social exclusion as the main focus of our project, and then the outcome was health, and then something with gender, and we were happily doing many interesting work, I would say. But then at a certain moment we thought, well, if we really want to change and understand the universal disadvantage of women, at a certain moment I came to the insight that how is it possible that almost all over the world there is this disadvantage. And if we really want to understand that, we really need to know what the mechanisms are, rather than comparing men and women, or in the worst case, only controlling for possible differences. So, and I thought, okay, if the question now comes to me, what has GenderNet achieved? I think for me, if it's only one thing, I think it was awareness of gender as a very, very specific variable in research. Awareness in the sense that it's omnipresent in a way. And if we want to make progress, then we should talk much more about why is it, what are the mechanisms behind. And I also thought of I think it's a famous quote, or at least it's not my quote, I read it somewhere, who said that if the brain is once stretched by a new idea, it never retains its original dimensions. And I think that's precisely what happened to me in GenderNet. Starting to think about gender as a normal researcher by controlling for it, at a certain moment I thought, yeah, well, really, we cannot just control. We really need to understand why this is the case, and therefore we also need more, I think, more life course research, because it's already it starts very in the beginning of our life, as a sort of maybe a very minimal change between men and women, and this accumulates over the life course until we, in the end, have huge differences. So I think that was the main achievement for me. Well, thank you. So thank you to GenderNet that I had this achievement.
Now, José, if you'd like to come, please.
All right, thank you, Chloé, and thank you, everyone, for inviting me to say a few words about my experience. Well, it's very difficult in 3 minutes to say, how much we learned, how much we accomplished, but it's been really exciting, and well, I like to highlight a few things which I think are really important or were really important, and which I learned from the project, just like my colleagues just mentioned. One of the things is the interdisciplinarity, I think, which is common to all the projects. I think that was really enriching to me and to all the members of the project. I come from the humanities myself, and I had never worked with people from the social sciences, and actually I learned a lot from new methodologies, actually, statistics, quantitative analysis, and qualitative interviews, things which I was not familiar with, and which were very enriching to me. It really expanded my mind, so to say. Also, the idea of the transnational approach to all the projects, which I think was also very enriching, and also the idea of including countries not just from Europe, but also Canada, Israel, and so on and so forth. I think actually one of our associate members is Israel, and we also learn a lot from let's say, strictly European perspectives and cultural perspective, actually. And one of the things which also was mentioned at the Paris meeting, I think, and which was also, I think, very interesting, and I think it's a cross-cutting issue, for all projects, was the idea of intersectionality. So I think that most of these projects, what they have in common is that they all explore gender, but not just gender. So we're all interested in other categories, intersection categories, such as class, social class, ethnicity, in my case, age and aging and ageism, and how, they are all like, all these categories form a sort of interconnected network of inequalities, and therefore this was also something which I think was very, productive, and from which we learn a lot throughout this GenderNet consortium. Something which was just mentioned before was also the idea of age and aging, which was mentioned as, just from the discussion of the early career, how to define early career researchers, or young researchers, or senior researchers, which in a way I think brings out the question of ageism and age, right? And what do we consider to be a young researcher? I think it's in itself an open question. Right? And why should we include senior or younger researchers and so on and so forth? I think it's also a question which we need to ask ourselves, and which we did through these projects, these GenderNet projects too. And actually it was, for in our case, the collaboration between generations, the intergenerational collaborations was another very important positive aspect, especially the combination of early career and established researchers, wherever their age, you know what I mean? Because we had, for example, a person who began her PhD at 50. Right? So is it an early career researcher or is it like established researcher, right? And so basically the idea of collaborating with pre-docs and postdocs and so on and so forth, bringing these teams together was very helpful. And I think it also facilitated and provided future opportunities for non-established scholars, let's say, to establish their and develop their careers. So this is something very, very interesting too. And also having people from the humanities and the social sciences at all levels and ages collaborating together was very enriching. And finally, I would like just to mention, in our case, the Maskage project, I think, is the only project which was specifically devoted to the humanities from the goal. So I also think it was very important, and I thank the GenderNet Consortium for considering the humanities as part of science. I think this is also interesting because I think it's pretty obvious, but it's not never mentioned, right? When we think of sciences, still we have these biases sometimes. We think of the hard sciences, life sciences, and you know, I think it's very important in the case of gender that we could prove again how cultural representations, in our case literary and film representations, contribute to the social construction of gender and how they go hand in hand and that they cannot be actually separated from each other. And I just hope that we have some opportunities for further funding and so on, because we just learned that we're just beginning, actually. In our case, our focus was on older men and older people, and honestly, we just realized that if we really want to understand the gender as a whole, the life course perspective, as was just mentioned, is essential. So I think that we also need to understand aging as a life course, from a life course perspective, and for that we need more money. Thank you very much.
So I realize that I stand between you and coffee, and therefore I will be brief. But I wanted to talk about why GenderNet Plus mattered. And I was very pleased when Chloe asked me if I would do this. And I'll think about it from a sort of overall perspective, a project perspective, and my individual perspective. So just as a bit of background, although gender is distinct from sex, and research on its impact on health, and that's what I know. Unlike José, I come from medicine. This research has a 30-year history, but it's still poorly understood, and it's even more poorly studied. So what are the confusions around gender? The first is sex and gender, and it does amaze me that we're still discussing this 30 years on, but I think there is confusion about what is sex and what is gender. The second confusion is around gender as a social circumstance, a social determinant of health, a contextual measure, and gender identity, which I consider to be an individual trait. And I think this confusion is creeping into research funding calls, which somewhat concerns me. The third confusion is the idea of measuring gender. And so there are many papers, or there are a number of papers, suggesting a quantitative measure of something that can't really be quantified. And the proposed scales either measure attitudes and beliefs about stereotypes. So the best known of those is the BEM sex role inventory, which does measure something important, but it doesn't measure gender. And the other is are papers suggesting that we can count individual behaviors and attitudes, and from that come up with a quantified measure of gender. And these don't consider intersecting social circumstances, such as socioeconomic status and how that intersects with sex. So when we met in Paris a few months ago, I can't say how wonderful that meeting was. I think anybody who was at it had the same feeling. We sort of didn't want to go home afterwards because it was very invigorating. It was really inspiring. And it was also reassuring to hear that most of the other projects had grappled with the same issues and that we had. Issues somewhat similar to what I've already outlined, but other issues as well. And that we have already, and we could, going forward, if there is a going forward together, pressure for more funding, we could advance the study of social determinants of health and how they differ by sex. And to me, that's what gender is. So for our project, I was part of the Future Gen project, and you'll hear more about it very soon, but we worked and learned across disciplines and across countries, and there was a richness of cross-pollination of ideas. So the three PIs were from medicine, economics, and social sciences, and we don't usually talk to each other, but we did, and we really did, and we listened to each other, and we had very different starting points and different perspectives that I think enriched what we did and how we approached questions. So as a result, I think we explored gender as a determinant of health and of care at a really deep level. And so finally, for me, I'm from Canada. You can probably tell by the sound of my voice, although you probably think I'm American because everybody thinks everybody from Canada, everybody who isn't from Canada thinks Canada is part of the US. We're very overshadowed by that country that is not as big geographically, but much bigger politically and population-wise to the south of us. So we're very overshadowed by the US, but philosophically, we're much closer to Europe. And so for me to get the chance to listen to people from Europe, to hear their ideas, to reflect on them through my my reality was just, it was really terrific. And so I thank you very much for that. And hopefully there will be more to come. Thanks.
Well, you know how to convey a message, and if that's not clear enough, yes, it's critical that we need further funding because I was highlighted by my colleagues, and it will be highlighted throughout the whole conference when they will be presenting really the scientific results. Much work remains to be done just to have further explore the different topics, and just to ensure also that beyond GenderNet Plus, the gender dimension, intersectionality is well addressed, well implemented in the research across all disciplines. So there is a need for, critical need for further funding, but in the meantime, it's also very important, we feel it was important that CNRS and to sustain this transnational and multidisciplinary network of researchers integrating sex, gender, and intersectionality in research. And all 13 research projects have strongly expressed interest in further collaboration, and as a result, and that was mentioned by Elizabeth earlier, CNRS Gender Equality Unit will coordinate a network open to, of course, GenderNet Plus researchers and beyond, and among the activities will be, of course, exchanging about funding opportunities, but also, just continuing discussing methodologies, meeting other communities of researchers working on the integration of gender dimension in different disciplines. So for those of you on site, but also online, we welcome you to contact us to have further information on this network. And you can just subscribe to the GenderNet Plus newsletter to receive updates about this network. So, and of course, you can contact me if you have any question. Thank you again to Susan, José, and Marja, and I will leave the floor to Florence to announce the break.